Hey, this is Craig with ProLite Gear, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how to develop a cold weather or winter clothing system. This is my actual own gear here, so some of it's a little wore out, but I'm going to take you through some of the tips I've learned over the years and just give you a couple ideas that might help you out when you're putting together your own clothing system. Brad's behind the camera today. Brad, if you think of anything I need to address, please speak up. Let's start with the three areas of the body that are your primary heat exchange areas of the body, and that's your head, your hands, and your feet. And there's been studies done by the military in conjunction with Stanford University on how to utilize those to regulate your body temperature effectively. And in one of the studies, they have the individual in a bath of cold water, and there's ice in the water, and they bring his core body temperature down to the point where he's about to be in a lot of trouble. He's done shivering. His organs are starting to shut down, and all they did was bring his hands out of the water and have them go into a device where they circulated some warm water around his hands. And there's so much blood flow going through your hands, and it's close to the surface. It's a special type of vessel there, that by just keeping his hands warm, they were able to bring his core body temperature up, and he was comfortable sitting in that bath full of ice water. So really try and pay attention to your head, your hands, and your feet. And so let's start talking about your head. A couple different options that I use when I'm out in colder weather. One is a balaclava. We all know that you can lose a lot of heat by not having your head covered, but you also need to think about your face and your neck. And so I actually prefer a beanie over a balaclava, but I've started carrying a balaclava just to have it with me in situations where I am getting quite cold and I want to warm myself up. Another option to carrying an individual balaclava would be to use one on a mid-layer that's built in, like this product from Mountain Equipment. Let's see here, we'll talk about, one important thing. With your balaclava or your beanie, whatever you're using, if you're going to be climbing, make sure it fits with your helmet on. I've seen people mistakenly take a very heavy ski cap, and they go to put their helmet on, and their helmet doesn't fit on top of their head while they're wearing that ski cap. I like to have a helmet that has a quick adjust on the back, so if I'm not wearing the balaclava or the beanie, I can tighten up my helmet pretty quickly. Let's move to my handwear that I'm wearing. This is a pair of my climbing gloves. They're pretty beat up, but one of the things that I do is, I don't have them on it with me right now, but I usually wear a liner glove underneath my handwear, and that's so if I do have to take my glove off for any reason, my hand isn't being exposed to, directly to the elements. One other thing that I like about a system like this is that if my hands are getting too warm, I can use them without the outer glove on, or I can remove the liner glove and just use the outer glove. So I've got some options to really dial in my my handwear to what's keeping me comfortable. One thing that I've played with over the years, and I really like it, I'm not wearing them right now, but I use a pair of wrist warmers. And the wrist warmers just allow me to keep my hands really, really warm when I don't have any gloves on at all. It may not work for everybody, but I found that it really works for me. I think they're getting a little hard to find now. I know Integral Designs used to make them, and that's what I use. Moving to my mid-layer here, I'm actually wearing 4 layers at the moment. I could go to 5. The number isn't really important, but if I was in a really cold condition and I wasn't moving much, I could put a belay parka or a heavy down parka over the top of this shell jacket. In addition to thinking about my head, my hands, and my feet, I usually think about what activity I'm going to be doing that day. There's a difference between if I'm going snowshoeing or trail running for maybe an hour or two. If I get too cold, I'm only an hour or two away from getting back to the comfort of my car or my house or what have you. And I'm at a pretty steady level of exertion during all of that. So I don't have to have as flexible of a system to do that. I kind of know, hey, I'm going to be moving pretty fast the whole time. I'm going to stay relatively warm. I'm probably more concerned about staying dry and being safe in case I run into some unexpected weather. If I'm doing something like climbing or hiking up a ridge to go skiing, that's a situation where I have periods of real stressful and strenuous activity, and then I'm standing around a lot. So you need to have a good layering system so you can take off some layers during heavy exertion and put them back on when you're standing still. So this is a Gore-Tex shell that I use, and I use this primarily when I'm ice climbing or in really, really windy conditions or really wet conditions. I wouldn't use this while I'm doing something that's pretty strenuous, simply because it doesn't breathe as well as some of my other options. And I think what we'll do is go into a video to kind of show the breathability of some of the different hard shells. I tend to not use hard shells much anymore. I tend to just go with a soft shell, and I'll show you a soft shell in a second. This is actually the way I layer up if I'm ice climbing on a pretty cold day. For mid layer, I prefer a down mid layer. There are some other options for mid layers, synthetics. Some people, if they're warmer blooded, don't need to even use a mid layer like this. This particular product is a Montbell down inner jacket. It weighs 8 ounces. It's highly compressible, so it doesn't take up much room in my pack, and it doesn't add much to my overall pack weight. And because I'm more cold-blooded than probably the typical person is, I like to have one of these with me at all times. When I'm actually climbing, I'll take this layer off and I'll just climb in a soft shell. I've had this soft shell for a while, but it's one of my favorites. It has the hood on it as well. This is adequate wind protection and water protection for most things around the Bozeman area, especially if I'm ice climbing or something. Once I've stopped climbing and I'm belaying somebody else, I will put on some of these other layers just to keep me warm. Underneath my soft shell, I've got a synthetic mid layer. This would be another good option. I tend to like synthetics over merino mid layers. I have quite a few of the merino mid layers. What I found is if I do get sweaty, they do an adequate job for me at wicking that moisture away from my body, but they don't tend to dry out as quickly as the synthetics. So I like synthetics for that reason. I also find synthetics are more durable, and I don't struggle with the odor problem because that product's not next to my directly next to my body. Underneath it, depending on how long I'm going to be out, what I'm doing, I may wear merino wool next to my skin, or synthetic if I'm not too concerned about stench from some of the synthetic stuff. Below the waist, I usually don't have to be as critical with what I'm wearing below the waist. I don't tend to get overheated below the waist, and I don't tend to get cold below the waist. Speaking of my legs down to my feet. I'm wearing a pair of soft shell pants here, which is what I typically use. Good, as long as you keep a good DWR on them, very weather resistant in terms of water, snow, even wet snow. Even if you're kind of mechanically agitating it in by sitting on, a snowbank or something like that. Underneath it, I'll have 1 or 2 layers. My base layer will be some merino wool leggings. Over that, I'll put a synthetic legging. It's kind of like a runner's tight. I like to have those 3 layers, so if I do tend to get too hot, I can take one of those layers off. One of the things you learn to do as you dial in your clothing system is start off your day a little bit cold, because you're starting off your day not moving. And once you start moving, you're going to be working up your core body temperature just through exertion. And if you start off warm, 10-15 minutes into your hike or your climb, you're going to be too warm, and you're going to start to get wet from the inside out via perspiration, and that's a bad thing. Footwear, just have several different options for footwear. Depending on the weather, I'm going to wear either a warmer mountaineering boot, or if I'm just day hiking or peak bagging, even a pair of light hikers or a pair of trail runners. I think that's it for right now. We'll go into more detail on some of the other aspects of developing a clothing system. But if you have any questions at all on any of this, please give us a call at 406-582-0508 or send us an email to info@prolitegear.com. Thanks for watching.